People can put up with anything, almost anything, as long as they know. Now, this is a statement that an old neighbour of mine said many, many, many years ago. And we were having a few drinks one night and reminiscing or putting the world to rights or whatever it is we were doing at that particular time. And she just said it. People can put up with anything as long as they know. And even at the time, I thought that's quite profound. That's a profound thing to say. And it's something I've often thought about afterwards in terms of any type and style of interaction, communication that you have within any facet of your life is really all about communication, isn't it? It's all about transmitting information and receiving information and what you do with that information. And there's many, many opportunities in life where people take that opportunity or exercise what they believe to be their right to then be creative with the information that they have, whether they decide or whether they have been told, don't tell them the full story, don't give them all of the facts or details, just tell them a little bit, or they just take it upon themselves to do that. And sometimes people do that, and sometimes they know why, and sometimes they don't know why. But consider that in terms of, say, a professional context, that you've been in a meeting with someone at some point, whether it be a client, whether it be a peer, whether it be a manager, whether it be your leadership team, or whomever, it doesn't really matter. And information is being imparted to you that just doesn't make sense. It's just not connected all of the way through. And you have that situation where you then have a decision to make to say, I don't understand what you're saying, or that's different to what you said last time, or I happen to know that what you're saying isn't true because I just received information that's contradictory to what you just shared there. It could be any of those, or maybe some sort of combination of that sort of thing. Then you start to get to a situation where you make it about yourself because the information is being imparted to yourself, and it starts to get distracting because you start to make up a bit of a story as to why that information is not being given to you in the format and the verbosity and the voluptuousness that it should be at that particular point in time. And then you start to possibly get insulted. You start to make up a negative story about what that looks like as you go forward, don't you? And don't pretend that you haven't done this at some point in the past. I guarantee that you have. And then you make it about you, as I mentioned a wee bit ago there, and that becomes something where you end up going off on a tangent in some way. You're not listening the way you should be. You're not as present as you should be because you're trying to either put the pieces together, or you're trying to provide yourself an opportunity to gather or extract more information from the speaker, or you're kind of saying a story of some description that could be, here we go again, we never get the truth from these folks, they don't trust us with the information, they treat us like kids, whatever that story looks like. Again, you've probably been in a similar circumstance or situation. And then think about it from your own point of view. There have been times guaranteed in your life where you have been economical with all the facts and data. Now, if you're talking to, say, for example, a kid, your child, your nephew, your niece, your neighbour's kids, whatever that looks like, you're not going to give them all of the context in terms of everything that an adult would be expected to know and comprehend and absorb and understand and take action on. From there, you're going to put it in a way that's understandable for them. So there might be key parts of the story that are modified, key parts of the information that have either been left out or dulled down a little bit, or whatever it looks like. But you know what I mean when I say you're going to speak to a kid a little bit differently than you're going to speak to an adult. But when you get to a situation when you're dealing with adults and then you just, for whatever reason, arbitrarily, or through some sort of competition that does or doesn't exist, it might be a fantasy in your head, or through a bit of a mean streak possibly, or you just kind of don't know, but you're just not going to give them all of that information because it took you a long time to get it, and why would you just give that away willy-nilly when they didn't even have to work for that? Whatever the reason, I bet you can look at a circumstance or situation where you haven't provided the full context and the full content of the story. And then what you're doing, unless you've absolutely pre-prepared for this particular talk or conversation with this person, and you know what you're going to impart, you know what you're not going to impart to them, and you're going to be prepared to be challenged on some of the holes that may appear in the story as you go forward. If you haven't done that prior preparation, then you're going to be in a situation where someone says, wait a second, that's not what you said last week, or that's different to what I was told earlier by someone else. Whatever it is, you're going to get some sort of resistance and possibly some sort of conflict type situation that would come from that. So if you haven't prepared, then you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to be stumbling over your words, you're going to be stuttering, you're going to be emming and umming, and or you might just go on the defensive and go on the attack in some way. Who knows? Either way, or however you react, it's not going to be good. It's not going to be conducive for an open, expansive relationship that you're trying to have with that other person. I assume you're trying to have with that other person. And it just, again, it's distracting, because you're distracted as you're trying to tell the story and leave out the best bits or the juicy bits or the controversial bits. Now, that's not to say that there aren't times when you are sworn to secrecy, or you don't have all the information, or you don't want to speculate and create any sort of fuss that's completely unnecessary. But, there's a way to say those things as well. I'm going to tell you as much as I know for right now. And if I can't tell you, I will tell you that I can't tell you that information. And that's information in and of itself, of course. But please respect the fact that I can't tell you. That's a different type and style of conversation. Then you're giving them the information. But back to the original point, people can put up with anything, almost anything, as long as they know. You could just sit someone down and say, I've got some information that's just been given to me. I have permission to give you this information, or I feel it's the right thing to do to give you this information. I don't think you're going to like it, but you need to hear me out. Please hear me out. You can set the scene and the circumstance for the conversation, of course, however you interact with that person, depending on how you know them and how you know their style under pressure or in different circumstances or situations. So you get to that spot where you tell them information. There might be pushback. There might be some sort of, verbal violence that comes from the information that you're imparting. You might not get through the full story. They might start to poke holes in it in the beginning. It might become elevated in terms of emotion, in terms of anger, in terms of finger pointing, whatever, negative thing could come from a conversation at a given point in time. But at some point, whether it's immediately in the moment or whether it's shortly thereafter, the person or group are going to say, thanks for letting me know, because now they know. Now they know, and that's people can put up with anything as long as they know. So now you have the information that I have. We all have circumstances where we can just move forward now. We have information that you have information you didn't have before. I have information I didn't have before in terms of your reaction to the information I've just given you. How do you want to proceed? What's the next best thing that we can do from this point forward? So think about this in terms of, if you decide to be, less than truthful about the information that you're going to give people, if you're going to in some way mask it, if you're going to in some way dilute it, if you're going to in some way embellish it, if you're going to in some way distort it, why are you doing that? Is that the right thing to do in that particular moment in time? What are you going to do if you get called out on it at that time? If you haven't thought about it, then shame on you. You're going to get what you get, and the interaction is going to be the interaction. But if you're purposefully going to do that, how are you going to lean into that conversation? How are you going to preempt some of the information you can and can't share, or will or won't share at that particular time? And how do you navigate the conversation and then get to a spot at the end where there's mutual appreciation for the information you've shared, hopefully an enhanced level of trust and a discernible set of next steps that you're going to take to move forward from there. People are way smarter than we give them credit for sometimes, and especially if you're dealing from a leadership position to various teams and you maybe think they can't handle it, or they're going to overreact and there's no point in worrying them right now. Yes, there's a whole bunch of corporate, maybe competitive reasons that information has to flow the way that it has to flow within an organization. I completely understand that. but let's err on the side of let's give them as much as we possibly can for right now, because I'd much rather have this negative conversation right now and possibly see some ideas blossom from those negative ideas rather than waiting to the very end, seeing whatever reaction comes from that, and then kind of rushing people through the process of absorbing, of convalescing on the information, trying to provide feedback. Oh, it's too late. That's information in and of itself. You're dealing with people's reputation, people's ego, people's, understand their sense of self, sense of worth in themselves, So if you err on the side of people can put up with anything as long as they know, which maybe makes the information you give them a little bit more expansive than maybe is the norm for you, you then have that opportunity to be known as the type and style of communicator that will tell them what they need to know when they need to know it, and it's going to be the truth. It's going to be as much as you know, unless you've caveated it with the fact that you can't say certain things, which I mentioned earlier there. What do you want to be known as? Do you want to be known as someone who's kind of shifty, who's kind of shady, who may or may not provide the facts, who may or may not be telling the truth, who may or may not just be playing at communication? Or do you want to be known as someone with integrity that people will sit down, they will listen to, they will absorb the information, they will believe it, they will appreciate it, and then you'll have a collective platform to move forward with them? I know what one I want to be, and it's certainly not the former, it's the latter. And I hope that you do too. I'd really be interested in your thoughts on this and your common practice on this. Are you someone who is economical with the information that you're sharing? If so, why? Be very, very, very honest with yourself. Why are you doing that? Is it through necessity or through choice? And if you're not, if you're a person who likes to have those conversations and impart that to people, the same question applies. Why? Why do you do that? Is it because of circumstances you've experienced before? Or it's just the type and style of person you are, it's the way you were brought up, it's the values that you have inherent within you? And how are you going to take this information and move forward from here? That's the key. Hopefully you've got some value from this. It will give you food for thought. It will give you pause to maybe think about what you're doing in the future, and then you can move forward with integrity and make the right communications decisions in the future. Take care.